I came back to Oak Haven in early March, worn out after 6 long months in Alabama, helping my younger brother through spinal surgery. All I wanted was the familiar sound of wind in the pines, the koi pond burbling behind my workshop, and the comfort of my own bed. Instead, I was greeted by a silence that felt wrong. No kids on bikes, no dogs barking, no sprinklers ticking across the lawns. The neighborhood looked parched, grass yellowed and brittle, except for my own yard, which my neighbor Roger had kept alive. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and dust, but the plumbing still worked, thank God. As I stepped outside again, a flimsy plastic notice on my fence caught my eye. The HOA demanded compliance with conservation measures. Scribbled at the bottom was the signature of the new president, Karen Duvall. Of course, it was her. Before I left, she'd been campaigning to control every inch of Oak Haven. No wind chimes, no mismatched flags, no garage sales. She wore her authority like armor. Now she was running the whole show. That evening, Roger came by. He looked thinner, nervous, eyes flicking around before he spoke. He told me Karen had shut down fountains, restricted sprinklers, and then claimed a leak in the community tank. She cut off water altogether. It was supposed to be temporary, but a week had passed and nothing changed. People were afraid to complain. Karen had her own inspectors, handing out violations like candy. Roger warned me to keep my old well quiet. Few remembered it existed, dug by my grandfather long before Oak Haven was built. It wasn't on any HOA map, and it still pumped clean, cold water. He hesitated before asking if I could spare some for his kids. I told him to bring barrels in the morning. By noon the next day, half a dozen neighbors had shown up quietly. I didn't make announcements, just told them to keep it discreet. I wasn't trying to be a hero, but I wasn't going to watch children go thirsty while Karen's grass stayed green. Naturally, it didn't take long for her to find out. That afternoon, an HOA email blasted across the neighborhood ordering everyone to attend an emergency water briefing. At the clubhouse, Karen stood in a cream pantsuit, holding a microphone she didn't need, preaching about corrosion and collapse. She declared that unauthorized wells were illegal. I stood and corrected her. My well predated the HOA by decades, legal and registered with the county. She faltered, just for a moment, and the crowd began to murmur. From that day on, Karen and I were at war. Notices appeared on my fence threatening fines. Security guards in rented polos showed up accusing me of redistributing utilities. I filmed them, cited county ordinances, and sent everything to Doug Williams, a retired city engineer who knew the law better than any HOA handbook. Gary, one of the original board members, gave me old property maps proving my well's independence. Neighbors began slipping by with their own stories: ridiculous fines, intimidation, bogus citations. I held a quiet meeting on my porch where people showed up with files and grievances, and for the first time in months, they spoke freely. I realized Karen thrived on silence. Breaking it was the first step. Her retaliation turned desperate. She posted inspectors at night, trespassed on lawns, even had men with bolt cutters try to sever my pipes. I filmed everything. The county inspector came, tested my water, and certified it cleaner than the city supply. When Gary delivered photos showing Karen's fountain still running, fed by a rerouted maintenance line, we had her. She hadn't shut down water for safety. She'd stolen it for herself. The city called a public hearing. By then, the neighborhood had shifted. People greeted each other again. Children rode bikes. Conversations returned. Still, when Friday came, we were all tense. I walked into City Hall with my binder of evidence, my grandfather's maps, and a stack of testimony letters from neighbors. Karen sat across from me in a white blazer, jaw tight, flipping through papers that looked thin compared to what I carried. The commissioners asked direct questions. No permits filed, no reports submitted, yet her fountain still ran. She stammered about community vision and temporary measures. Doug laid out the evidence, photo by photo, timestamp by timestamp. Then I stood. I spoke about living in Oak Haven for 13 years, about watching the place turn from friendly and open to fearful and divided under Karen's leadership. I explained the history of my well, how I shared water freely while she hoarded it, how she turned the HOA into a weapon of control. I held up letters from neighbors, parents, veterans, retirees, all intimidated into silence. She used water, I said, a basic necessity, to punish and control. When I sat down, the room was silent but for the court reporter's keys. The commissioners recessed briefly, then returned with their decision. Effective immediately, the HOA's authority was suspended. Karen was removed from her position, and her actions nullified. The case would be referred to the city attorney. The gavel fell, and Karen walked out without a word, stripped of her power at last. The days after felt brighter. Neighbors smiled again. The lawns were still dry, but something in the air had changed. Within a week, the HOA board reorganized. Fines from the last 2 months were rescinded, apologies posted, and for the first time in memory, an open election was scheduled. I hadn't planned to run, but neighbors wrote my name on ballots anyway. In the end, a retired principal named Claire Watkins became president. Fair, steady, exactly what we needed. I joined a new oversight council to keep the board accountable. Karen sold her house 2 weeks later and disappeared. Life in Oak Haven began to heal. We held monthly town halls in the park. Kids rode through sprinklers again. Neighbors shared food and laughter, and the word violation faded from memory. We built a fund to help struggling residents with repairs. We painted the old gazebo Karen once tried to tear down and held our first community picnic in over a decade. Emma, Roger's daughter, gave me a scrapbook she'd made with drawings of me at the well and Karen fuming with cartoon steam. I told her I hadn't saved the neighborhood. I'd just turned the water back on. But deep down, I knew we'd fought for something larger. The right to live without fear of control, the right to say no when something felt wrong, the right to belong to each other again. Weeks later, I found a folded note in my mailbox. It was from Karen. The handwriting was neat cursive. You were right. I went too far. I forgot the difference between order and ownership. I hope someday the water forgives me. I tucked it into Emma's scrapbook. I didn't need an apology, but I appreciated it. Now, when I walk past her old house, the fountain is dry, hedges overgrown, mailbox number missing. Just a house, no more, no less. Oak Haven has moved on. One morning, I found painted stones around my well, each marked with a neighbor's name, one reading simply, us. I sat there a long time, listening to the water flow steady and strong, free as the people it now belonged to.